All right, good morning, everybody. You ready to go? You got lots of questions? You can type them in real fast. If you don't want to type in your question, we will have microphones around the room, so you can just raise your hand. We'll get you set up with a mic as well. So I'm going to invite my SMIG panel attendees up to the stage here. We'll give them a second. So while these guys are coming up here, put your questions in the Slido. And again, this is going to be a mix of our SMIG leaders as well as some AESQ members. All right, so before we get started, we will do quick introductions for the team here. So I am Melanie DeRue from GE Aerospace. I will be your facilitator here. So as you guys are putting Slidos in, I will be furiously scrolling through them. So please vote on the questions if you would like answers, and I will get to those first. But I'm going to pass the mic around and have you guys introduce yourself.
Good morning. Pete Tatey, Pratt & Whitney, Senior Fellow for Quality Engineering.
And what SMIG you're on?
Process Control Methods.
Marty Ham, Consulting Engineer, GE Aerospace. I'm the discipline lead for APQP, MSA, Alternative Inspection Frequency, and Process Control for GE. I am here for MSA, Alternative Inspection Frequency, and AD.
Lena Ekerbom-Wendel, and for GKN Aerospace, and I'm an airworthiness engineer working with the design work SMIG.
Asun Sathyanathan, VP of Quality for PCC Airfoils, and I'm with the Human Factors SMIG group.
Good morning, I'm Carl Evans from Rolls-Royce. I'm here as a lead for the APQ and PPAP SMIG.
Good morning, Jason Sink, Senior Quality Manager, GE Aerospace, FAI SMIG.
Raul Gapozzi, Discipline Chief at Pratt & Whitney, and I'm the DPRV SMIG.
Jim Wilson, Pratt & Whitney Canada. I'm Senior Manager of the Supplier Quality Assurance and Development Group there, and I represent the group responsible for quality audits and the AS 13100 self-assessment checklist.
All right, well, Jim, I'm going to have you keep the mic because I think the first question is actually going to come to you. So first question that you guys voted up pretty highly is, from a practical standpoint, many in my organization are wondering why the volume of customer audits hasn't subsided in the wake of AS 13100. I know you've got some fun stuff to talk to us about this afternoon, but do you want to give us some insight there?
Yes. Okay, well, 6-7 years ago, this group, the Quality Audits group, sat down around a table, and it was a very large group, trying to figure out how can we stop auditing our suppliers more. We were taking up too much of their time, sitting in a room, going through a checklist, and we all know we do it, and we all have shared suppliers. Our data shows that 3.75 suppliers are shared among at least two of us companies up here on the stage. So we know that we're constantly doing this, and in the past that was necessary because each one of us had a huge document, AESQ R1, S1000, Sabre 3, and it was, the way that we had to justify for ourselves that our supply base was compliant. AS 13100 took a lot of the meat out of those documents, those large documents from back in the day, and put it into a single standard. And the idea was that once we had the single standard, we would all be able to use your self-assessment, the RM 13009 self-assessment checklist, as the basis for, maybe not having to re-audit some of the points that are in that checklist. That hasn't happened as well as it is. I will tell you a little bit later, actually this afternoon, I'm going to be presenting what we're doing with that checklist, because right now the checklist isn't detailed enough for at least my company. I won't speak for the other companies, but at least for my company, it's not detailed enough for me to really understand whether your self-assessment has properly identified whether you're compliant or not. So I know some of the companies have built in AS 13100 questions into their normal audits. Some companies are not doing so much. I know Pratt & Whitney Canada is not auditing so much in detail to 13100, but we do still have some of the concepts, some of the subjects that are in 13100 in our regular audits. But it's going to get better, and we'll touch on it a little bit this afternoon. Once we publish AS 13100 Rev A in the new year, hopefully, it will come along with a much better tool, a much more specific tool, a tool that has guidance for every single shall in 13100. So both suppliers and our auditing teams we'll have an idea of what to look for in order to verify compliance to any given shall that's in that document. Hopefully that will allow us to share that document between us and do less auditing when we do have to. There's still always going to be something each one of our companies wants to do, but hopefully that will be minimized and a 3-day audit becomes a 1.5-day audit, or a 2-day audit becomes a 1-day audit. We're trying. We understand the pain that we cause you on a regular basis having to host us constantly for these audits, so we're working on it.
All right, thank you, Jim. So the next one up is, why call the RM templates reference materials when some customers are making them required templates? Thoughts on that from the team here?
I can take that one. All right. I know I've been guilty of that myself in reviewing stuff for GE, where we've seen templates that the suppliers have provided us and it doesn't include everything that we're looking for. So we've pushed back to say, use the one that comes with the RM. One of the things we did in creating those templates for the RMs was commonize them between the major people on the committees. So the idea was, instead of previously there would have been a GE template, a Pratt template, an MTU template, an IHI, and there are 10 different versions of the same thing. We at least agreed in principle that we would go to this one template and always accept it. So they are referenced in that they're not required, but in a lot of cases, if what you send us doesn't meet the same intent or have the same information in it, we will send it back and say, hey, can you please use the RM? Or I've also sent it back and said, can you include these 3 columns? If they send it to me in a spreadsheet of their own, I'm just like, you're missing these contents that we need to be able to review your package properly and understand it. We need these information. So I think that's part of it. One is we tried to commonize amongst ourselves to an agreement we could agree to, and because we don't always require it, we kind of kept it the same as to it's part of the RM. I know with 8D, especially I've seen recently, we're accepting any of the versions. So when we initiate one with a supplier at GE, and I know Pete and I have talked about this, they're doing the same at Pratt, we'll let the supplier, hey, we recommend you go to the RM site. You can pick any of those. We'll work with any of them. So I think we're trying to make it more flexible, but the content and effort we put into those, I know we're currently updating the alternative inspection one, and we've probably put 10 to 20 hours of meetings into that template, just the template, right? And then matching the content in the RM to fit the template. So there's a lot of effort going into it, which is why we're strongly recommending it. I can't say I've ever refused anything else, but I will push back and say, hey, can you go look at this one, make sure you're including all the information, right? If you want to stick to yours, fine. But if you don't know where you're going, start with that one. So hopefully I answered that one.
All right, any other thoughts from team members?
One other quick thought, like eventually we'll be getting away from templates down the road, into more systems, and especially in this age of AI, when an escape occurs and failure modes happen, today there could be guide-up alerts to help alert companies using a like material that there was an issue and you need to have some due diligence around that. Well, what about an escape that has a failure mode and a cause structure that could be understood by others, and where they could be taking advantage of the learning by someone to help make their process more robust? Eventually we'll get to that point, and that's something we are working on. Right now we're in that period where we have templates, Excel, because everyone has Excel. And we typically would tell folks, as long as it meets, the intent of what we're looking for, you could use whatever template you want. It's always best to try to be consistent. But that's going to change, especially because what goes into an Excel spreadsheet? Data. Data can be used to make decisions, and we need to be more intelligent with it. That's the path we're going down right now. That's got a ways to go, but we're well on our way in going down that path. So things are going to change relative to templates. But take advantage of the ones that are on there now, and we're going to try to put some more. But because that's really where you can get started right away. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Pete. Yeah. All right, so next question is, how far down in the supply chain should AS 13100 requirements be flowed down? If you are a raw material supplier, how far back should they be flowed down? Any thoughts on that?
So it doesn't go down to the mill, right? That's defined by the type of supplier. So if you're a mill, you wouldn't have to. Well, pockets of AS 13100 would still apply, but like if there's inspection for lighting requirements. So it would go all the way down, but everything may not apply, right? So as the purchase order holder from the customer, you have to disseminate what would apply and what doesn't apply. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Just expand that. I mean, as you flow it down, the type of supplier that you're flowing it down to will change. So we have 6 different supplier types defined in AS 13100. So if you're the build-to-print supplier, you've got a lot to do. But if you're using a component that's designed by a tier 2 level supplier, well, then they're a design responsible supplier. They're going to have a different set of requirements. Even though you just flow down 13100, or most of the time you're flowing down our ASQR or you're flowing down Sabre, that second supplier's got to understand they only need to look at the questions or the shalls that apply to them as a design responsible supplier. Then if you're going down to a special process house that is doing something on the parts that are going into your part, well, they only need to take a look at the section for special processes and what actually applies. So when you get down to the mill level, we don't have a supplier type defined for raw materials except for industry standards, which says almost nothing applies. But otherwise, that's really the key is, so, you as the top level build-to-print supplier may have a bunch of things that you need to make sure that you're compliant to. But as you trickle down, as you get more specific to the suppliers below you, it may not be the same list. And it's just, make sure that you're telling your sub-tiers, hey, look, go make sure you're looking at which questions apply to you. Table 1, which is the applicability table in AS 13100, and in our new wonderful checklist, which we'll get to later, is going to be able to make it a little bit easier for you to do that.
Okay, thank you, Jim. So soon, I'm going to pick on you for a minute. So somebody asked, my org is new to human factors. Do you have any good examples of how human factors considerations have made big impacts? Any examples you can share?
Can you repeat that question? So how human factors have made a big impact?
For smaller, or for any organization type?
Yeah, so what I would speak to is just the science of human factors in itself. Large company, small company, there's value in how it's rolled out and incorporated. So the biggest benefit I would kind of speak to is the human is not intending to make a mistake when a mistake happens, right? And I think that's probably one of the biggest benefits, regardless of the outcome, to kind of frame as you're conducting investigations, or there's a lot of really good relevant content in the RM manual. And it's that fundamental principle that they're not intending to make a mistake. And if you approach the investigative process with that mindset, and you're looking to actually design a system and fix upstream systemic processes with that type of mindset, it's kind of revolutionary in how you can you work on the design, not disciplining the individual. So that's probably small company, big company. It's been a pretty critical takeaway. We've implemented this both in some of our less than 90-person facilities to more than 500 people facilities, and that's a common theme that's pretty consistently come out. Is Eric spoke to this yesterday, how we've even redefined our quality rules has been based on a bit more of a punitive initial scope of how we define quality rules, to now, due to human factors, we've completely revised that to make that much more of a, it's asking the questions fundamentally different.
So can I start?
Yeah, give us a practical example of. Can you give us a practical example of the things that you just talked about? I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
I had this question informally yesterday, And I agree with everything you're saying. I've been saying it in the automotive world as well, and contract manufacturing. But sometimes I struggle with a real world, hey, I've got this situation, now how do I help this person?
Yeah. So I'll ask with one specific example, without necessarily getting into the nuance of it. Their CMM issue we had with a specific customer, the intended questionnaire in itself, if you follow the standard process, it starts with 3x5 why. You have your standard protocol, right? Asking the why question to that individual, we were not able to extract what actually happened. Because as soon as you ask why did you make that mistake, right? Immediately they get defensive, they kind of lock up, they're not essentially explaining what actually took place. So the small change, both in the training and in how we've flown down our questionnaire process, it's asking how. So describe to me what happened. Tell me how this came to be. So something as simple as changing that in that specific CMM investigative process very quickly came to an outcome that was, I don't think we would have gotten there if we had followed our traditional process of asking the why, right? And why just forces somebody into a corner versus the how.
All right, go ahead, Marnie.
So what I was going to mention is there is a plan early next year to do an 8D human factors co-webinar to sort of go through that. There is one out there where we did, I think it was last year, we did 8D using human factors, or how could you incorporate human factors into an 8D. But we did not partner with human factors. We've already started discussions with the human factors team to jointly do a webinar next year to go through exactly that, because we know everyone's doing 8Ds all the time. But how do we then start incorporating the human factors in reality? So that's part of the thing we're trying to do, is not just provide the checklist, but like say, let's walk you through some scenarios.
I have a short example, and it was someone who realized that this person had made a mistake, and they were not afraid to speak up. So it was not, we had discovered a problem, it was not an investigation. It was someone realizing, 2 weeks ago I used the wrong parameters. And that person was speaking up, we could contain the problem, and we actually almost gave this person a medal to say that don't be afraid to speak up, because that's the way we make better parts.
Oh, thank you. On that handout, on the process control methods table, I don't know how many of you have it in your hand now. If you look at the very back page, there's a couple of really good examples. One shows a gentleman assembling reciprocating compressors. He's torquing 12 bolts per compressor, and he gets 2 compressors at a time. So he has to manually torque 24 bolts. What's the possibility of human error in that process? Missing a torque, torquing it incorrectly. So one of the things that we want to really start driving, and it's absolutely integrates with human factors, is understanding the red flags that are posed by a process. These are the risks that you need to have folks trained to identify, especially when they're involved in a root cause investigation. Is it a highly repetitive condition? Is it complex instructions? Is it a look-alike part? I remember one time being on an investigation when I was at Hamilton, and we shipped out a 787-8 fan that went to Boeing, and it was supposed to be on a 787-9 air conditioning pack. And the only difference between the -8 and the -9, you would never know it by looking at the two. It's the software inside. So a human error was made in pulling the wrong part. We've seen cases where wrong wire was rolled on a particular spool. They had the right part number, but it came from the wrong larger spool. They had an incorrect part number, but they both were white coating, but they were next to each other on the shelf. These are examples of where human error can come in. How do you overcome the human error? That's where mistake proofing, error proofing comes in. There'll be a lot more on that in the next revision of RM 13006. We touch upon it now, but not in enough detail. We've recognized that, so we're going to be adding that in. In root cause investigations, in your standard work for how someone goes about doing an 8D, are there any questions related to, is the failure mode driven by human error? And are we looking in RM 13010 at the sources of human error and then trying to figure out corrective actions that overcome? And those corrective actions, look on the very back page of that handout. It talks about the levels of mistake proofing. Level 1 means you cannot possibly make the error that drives the failure mode. Level 2 is an alert. You're in the error state, but it'll allow you to get out of it. So we need to educate our folks to understand mistake proofing levels, the red flags that drive the need to error proof, and how that plays in with the sources of human error in RM 13010. So hopefully that provides a few examples. Yeah.
I got one thing before we move on for that, and I'm happy to show anyone where this is. Just last week, in fact, there's a real example of going through a investigation situation using the culpability matrix on the AESQ website that we just went through. So I'm happy to show everyone that we just did that as the Human Factors Group last week. All right?
All right, thank you, Dan. So webinars have been mentioned a couple different times now. There is a question that says webinars have been great. I think they've been very helpful. But is there any thought to do actual workshops working through the tools? Any thoughts on that, SMIG leaders?
Well, I know we have talked about it with the planning committee about having workshops as part of the conference. You know, we could have different types of themes, you know, MSA workshops, process control, name the RM. There could be a workshop around that. So it's definitely something that we have talked about. We've started with the webinar initiative to get the word out and to provide detailed enough web training within the webinar in a short period of time so that suppliers could pull those off the past events website and use that material directly for your own internal training. They're designed to be able to use it exactly as it is. So we encourage you to do that. Plus you have the video of it. So if you miss one, they're always there. There's plenty more on their way. But yeah, workshops, you know, and I'm not going to steal Earl's thunder because he's going to talk about training and workshop availability later on this afternoon. I don't know if you want to mention anything about that. In the corner over there. Okay, so he's going to be over there, my right.
Sorry, Pete and I have been discussing how possibly to combine some where GE is currently doing some and Pride is doing some and we're replicating work. So we have started initial discussions on how we might be able to expand that offering instead of each company having to provide their own. Is there a way we can leverage AESQ so that we're not repeating each other, right? And then, you know, there's only so much bandwidth to go to so many trainings. Do you really need to do an 8D training with Pratt & Whitney and then another one with GE, right? Same with MSA. How can we leverage what we're doing across companies?
In this Design SMIG meeting earlier this week, we decided that we want to have a not a webinar, because we want to have more of a dialogue. So we will be sending out an invite for a workshop or seminar type thing, probably not a face-to-face meeting, but a digital one, to invite all design responsible suppliers, because it's the same amount of differences between different design responsible suppliers as in that table 1, but we only have one column. So we need to give more detail, more experience, and have more dialogue about what's giving us friction.
So just in case you're shy and you don't come over and talk to me when I'm over in the corner, if you look at that chart over there, you'll see the little star there. That bottom row, those courses have all been developed by the SAE. They're professional level courses, and they're all created around AS 13100. And thank you, Carol, the Vanna White, for the day. And they're very focused. There is a fee for those classes. The webinars that we do tend to be very focused on a certain topic. So those are more, I won't say vanilla, but they more overarching. And where we need to go down a notch or two, we do webinars usually. So those are available to you, and feel free to come over and chat with me. And then Sherry over here, she works for the SAE. We can talk to you about those.
One last thought. Each and every one of you is going to get a survey after this conference is over. We're very good at sending that out. One of my hats at the AESQ is managing the supplier surveys that we do on a regular basis. Now, we chose not to do one last month. We usually would do one around then so we could report the results, but because we were fairly status quo in what we were doing, we decided not to do one kind of thing. But please feel free when you get that survey directly from the SAE about this conference. If you think that the next conference or a future conference could benefit from maybe day 2 being a series of these workshops, or let's call them training courses, whatever you want to call it, please put a comment in there. It'll help us to judge what the interest level is so we can plan those future ones.
Great, thanks, Jim. So I'm going to pose this to all of you. We're a small company trying to use the RMs without big fancy tools. Have you seen success in small suppliers implementing these RM features without digital tools?
So the short answer to that is yes. I came from the automotive world, and I was initially a very small supplier. We used all Excel-based tools. It was easy to use, fantastic. It's the same here. Aerospace has modified it to Aerospace's needs. It's simple to use. The tools are already out there on supply chain management. What is it? SCMH website. I'm sure there's all sorts of QR codes on these posters that you can go to and get there very readily and easily.
So Jason, I'm going to pick on you for a minute because you're in a very special portion of GE's business that is not allowed to use a lot of digital tools. How is it going with using these tools on non-digital formats?
So for my particular line of business, it's actually a lot easier. We are not allowed to use a lot of online applications. We have a lot of sensitive information that just can't get out there. So it makes it easier. It makes it easier and simpler to manage. But what you have to do is come up with a document control policy and procedure that's very effective and very robust to be able to actually manage those appropriately.
All right. Any other comments from the group on that? Pete?
So like my experience at Pratt, our PPAP engineers will help suppliers, especially the small ones. They'll go out and work with them on PFMEAs. Our manufacturing engineers are heavily involved with supplier MEs. They go out with them on helping suppliers walk through a PFMEA, and they're using nothing more than an Excel-based tool. It's very good. But it's not the digitization yet that we have to really worry about. It's more of how do I handle, a part that has 3,000 features on it? How do I apply this to a special process outfit? Those are the things that we typically get, questions around, and not so much how to use the Excel tool. as I mentioned earlier, that will eventually progress into a more sophisticated tool that will be more efficient, but we're just not there yet. We're getting there. But again, it's not a roadblock to start doing PFMEAs. The best thing to do is to pick some part numbers and get out there and do it. And by all means, get it to be part of the manufacturing engineering standard work. How do we engineer a process? Someone would ask you that question. How do you engineer a process? Well, part of our ME standard work is using PFMEA. Taking a drawing, laying out a part plan from that, a process plan, and then applying PFMEA. It's just natural. It's part of how we do things. So that's where we got to get to.
All right. So before I choose kind of final questions here, I do want to open it up to the audience. Does anybody have non-Slido questions they want to ask? Ian? Carol's coming over to you.
Can I just add on to the response around smaller companies? And I think it's just worth noting that the AESQ is launching a number of focus groups, and one of those focus groups specifically is focused on smaller suppliers dealing with exactly the problem that question has just answered. So if you are a smaller supplier, if you are interested in learning more about that focus group, then either talk to, I guess, myself or Carol, or I think Helen is leading that part. So it's just something to bear in mind. That's specifically trying to answer those kind of questions.
You can also use the Contact Us form on AESQ to ask questions about the smaller suppliers as well, if you don't know how to contact us.
Okay, thank you, Carol. All right, so another general question for you guys as a group. Oh, hold on, I lost it. How do you get production or lower level operators to put the same emphasis on zero defects? Seems the best way to get our goal is working bottom to top. And how can we use the RMs to emphasize this to production workers and lower level operators?
Real quick, one way would be each day at Pratt, we have a standard production system, and the very first meeting of the day is with the hourly, the work, and their team leader. And part of that is to go over what disruptions occurred on equipment and what quality defects may have been created from the day before or the shift before. The end of the week on Fridays is a continuous improvement session to work on the top 3 issues that occurred and to help resolve them through real-time problem solving. That incorporates a lot of the elements of 8D. So the short answer is build as part of the process that involve the hourly folks. We also have quality clinics within each of the value streams. So if the problem is too big for the operator, they can go to the clinic that has an expert in root cause corrective action and local gauging and diagnostic equipment to help, diagnose what the problem is. So again, if that gets to be too large for them and they need to have help, they have that help available. Again, that's all, part of the QMS, and it's all part of the day-to-day operation.
MSA is going to be revised, the MSA RM. And one of the things we did is the first chapter is, the layman's way we're describing it is for those who can't spell MSA. So it is very geared towards describing understanding what an MSA is and why we do it at the operator level. So it doesn't cover everything in zero defects, but it definitely helps them understand why are they measuring and why do I care that my measurement system works. And the current one, right, is very much geared towards experts, and we are changing that format. And that first chapter, we picked up the concept because we're partnering actually with IAQG and the Supply Chain Material Handling book team to rewrite that manual And we said they had a really basic introduction, and we said, okay, let's grow on that. So we just nicknamed it the chapter for those who can't spell MSA. So we're trying to build on that concept.
Yeah, I think one of the key elements in order for them to truly feel involved is you have to have a open reporting culture, right? So you have to sustain that culture where their voice is actually heard. So as we're rolling this out, developing all the tools, if they feel like something doesn't fit, they don't understand, or there's questions to be raised, there's no easier way to shut them out than, I guess, not developing that culture. So just having that open reporting culture, making sure the feedback is quickly followed through so their voices are actually heard is going to be an absolutely critical component to this.
Absolutely. Thank you, Asun. So any other questions from the audience before I get into the very last one from Slido? Oh, we've got one in the corner over there.
So as a consumer, I would expect if I'm buying something that I get it defect-free. So I understand that you as a consumer expect to get defect-free parts. Why is there such opposition when we all expect that what we buy is defect-free? And I understand that AS 13100 is a tool to make it universal, the questions that are asked, and we all work towards that same goal. But as an expectation, why would you just not accept parts that are not defect-free and put it on we as suppliers to replace those parts and put the cost back on us? And, you know, it just seems this exercise is something that we should all expect, that we deliver defect-free parts.
Thoughts on that?
What's the question? Well, as quality people, we all agree.
Yes, we absolutely agree with you, 100%. In a perfect world, that would work, but our supply chains are all extremely complex. And because of that, working with small businesses, we know, based on we're all people, defects are going to happen. And so we as OEMs look towards what can we do to alleviate that burden to some degree for the suppliers, to accept product that may not be perfect to what we asked for, but will work for what we need it for. And so it becomes a sort of catch-22, right? If I sent back huge structures to our casting suppliers when there was a defect within them, that would run them out of business pretty quickly in a lot of cases. We can't do that. We can't functionally do that. We would end up with no supply chain in the end.
Once again, as a responsible business, and everybody, I would assume everybody in this room is a responsible business because they are here. It makes more sense to demand that the expertise go towards the production of these perfect parts. Once again, it may put us out of business because we're an NDT service. So if there's defect-free, we may not be needed. So for us, it's a good thing. But I would rather be on an airplane that I know is going to stay up in the air as opposed to requiring my services. So once again, I'm speaking from a point that if it ever happened, there's a good chance you may say after X amount of time, we don't need this anymore. So the question is, why not be a little bit more strict? Many times, and I'm not saying anybody in this group because I believe that we're here for a reason, but sometimes people will try to disguise or they'll do illegal repairs. Should those suppliers not even be in the supply chain?
So I'd like to, if I can take a stab at that. When I think about the journey for zero defects, again, journey, it is not about delivering perfect parts. It's about creating zero defects throughout the entire process. Because if you don't have a defect that was ever created, you can't possibly deliver it. Now, again, as Jason mentioned, we are all human. We have all run the stop sign. We have all turned, we've all gone through the red light as it's changing. We've all had those types of mistakes, and we think, okay, it's not a big deal, it's not a big deal. For me, what keeps me up is not I've got a defect here that somebody should have seen, the inspector should have caught it, inspectors, they should never miss something, NDT should have found this. That's not the things that worry me, because we do have, I would say, good captures on that. My concern is this part goes into a tank for 10 minutes too long. This goes into a heat treat furnace at slightly the wrong temperature. And because we don't have effective monitoring tools, we're now not getting something that we're expecting that has a condition that we can't understand or define. So the use of the tool set in the 13.1 is not just about saying, okay, the parts always have to be right at the end. It's about making sure that we don't have the possibility for those defects throughout. And that's what I'm trying to push every one of my sites to, is to make sure that that's what we're doing. Not just, okay, we got the right parts, and we don't ever get escapes back to the customer.
Any other comments from the group? All right, thank you, Nathan. So I'm gonna put one more question out here, and it's for Carl, which you have the next topic of the day anyways, but it is, how do we best drive APQP across all functional groups, knowing it's not just a quality ask or task?
Can I defer that to my slot? Because that's what I'm going to get into, quite frankly. So you will see some things on the table, a little picture, and there's something called a RACI. We're going to talk about that sort of thing. But simply, the recognition is that, 2 in 3 of you in the room is in a quality function. I'm going to ruin my slot now, because I was going to do a bit of a quiz on this, but to be honest, the 2 and 3 in the room aren't the ones which are going to make APQP work in your business. So how do you go around getting that? That's actually generally some activities which we're going to touch on today, either in the slot here or during the SMIG sessions, which is about starting to break that down of who's involved with what. And that's to give you a tool to go back in your business, which is then start to help your business recognise actually this content core in APQP is a cross-functional piece of work. It involves people to be accountable, responsible, consulted, informed on stuff. And here's a map, something simple, which starts showing you back in the business. So I'm very conscious that I'm going to give you a direct answer to that, because actually part of the slot we're going to be doing is to start stirring that thought amongst you.
All right. Well, great segue, Carl. We are going to wrap up the panel now, so I do want to say thank you to all of our panel attendees for volunteering to sit up in front of everybody and answer rapid-fire questions. But if you guys continue to have questions or have questions we have not answered, feel free to put them in the Slido. We do look at those quite often as to how can we help address things in the RMs, conferences, and things going forward. So if you have questions that didn't get answered or that you forgot to ask, please put them in the Slido for today. Or come and see us at all the tables. All right, thank you so much, guys.